Welcome to Hallsdale News and Education, and today we're going to talk about the top 6 reasons why insurance companies fail to pay out on a claim. Always frustrating. Simon, thanks for joining us today. You're senior partner in Hallsdale, one of the founders. So lots of experience of those unwanted situations where people think they've got cover and suddenly don't have it. If I'm a landlord and I own several properties, which is an area that we are very focused on, use that maybe as an example of some of the situations you see.
Yes, I can do that. I mean, obviously, landlords want to protect the risks the best they can. And in those circumstances, they need to ensure that they give the right information to the insurer right the way through the life of the policy, from the proposal point of view and at renewal, and if there are any changes during a period of insurance. The situation is that we need to ensure that the landlord gives the correct information about the property. So that can lead to a claim being turned down. So that may be the type of tenant that the landlord is going to put into the property, whether that might be a student or whether it be professional people. It's a very important bit of information from the insurers. It could be a situation where the location of the risk, to make sure that they've got the postcode right, the description of the property, whether it's a 2-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom house or a 4-bedroom house or it's a flat, that information needs to be presented in the right way. If they fail to give the right information to the insurer, then potentially that could lead to a claim being turned down. And that's the reason number 1 is not giving the right information to the insurer at the outset or during the policy as it runs, and giving the opportunity to the insurer to say, we might need to tweak things or change it slightly. Secondly, is the landlord also really needs to know his policy. I mean, you know, a policy is a legal document and they need to understand what is covered. You think you can go and a policy will be described as an all risks policy. Well, that's an insurance term. It means all risks. It doesn't cover for everything. There's a specific criteria with insurance that's saying these are an all-risk policy and these are the types of things it covers. And that could be fire, lightning, aircraft explosion, and so on and so forth. So an all-risk policy doesn't mean all risks. So a landlord might be thinking, oh, I can make a claim here because I've got an all-risk policy, but that particular risk that's damaged this property is not going to pay his claim. So he needs to understand the policy.
What about getting the right level of insurance? Because there's a proper calculation that's got to be done, hasn't there?
Absolutely. That one of the major issues with an awful lot of claims is underinsurance. You have a situation where, again, at the outset, you need to ensure that you're getting the right rebuild cost. A lot of people get this wrong in the sense that when they're asked for the value of the property, they give the value of the property that they've just bought. So they might, be 200,000, 300,000, 400,000. Well, that's the sale price or the purchase price. That's not the rebuild cost which you are insuring for. Yeah. And the only way to get the rebuild cost is to get a surveyor to go in properly and calculate that for you. And then there's certain additions that you put onto that rebuild cost. If you get that figure wrong, and I'll give you an example, say that you've got a property that you insure for £100,000. And it should have been insured for £200,000 rebuild cost. If the insurer comes along on those circumstances, they will look at that and say, well, you've been 50% underinsured. So instead of paying you the £100,000, which is what you insure for, they'll only pay you £50,000.
Wow.
So you could be £150,000 short in your pocket to rebuild that property. Yeah. So it's vitally important you get your sums insured correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in the day-to-day use of property, you've got accidents and damage and something called fair wear and tear. So is that an area is that the fourth area you would say that?
Yeah, that's another area, is that again, there's a situation, you need to keep your property, you need to keep it in good repair. Insurance is not there to repair a property for you. Yeah. So, you need to continue with your maintenance on a regular basis, painting and decorating and making sure that the boiler is okay, making sure that the pipes are still sound, the electrics are all okay. That is the responsibility of the landlord. And if you don't do those basic maintenance things and then something goes wrong, I don't know, a tile falls off the roof because the roof hasn't been looked at on a regular basis, and then you go to claim for that tile missing or damage to the property. property and it comes under fair wear and tear, your claim won't be paid because it is fair wear and tear. You should have been dealing with that from a maintenance point of view. That's not what insurance is there for.
Yeah, so it could be that tenants aren't using the air extractors properly and mould is building up.
Absolutely, potentially. If there's something that's been gradually occurring over a long period of time, and that you should have been aware of it or be seeing that item hasn't been dealt with, then that is a maintenance issue. It's not an insurance issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, with being a landlord, whether it's commercial or residential property, but particularly residential property, you've got periods where the property is not occupied. How does that affect claims?
Well, again, it's a material fact. So if your property becomes unoccupied, you should let your insurer know as soon as you're aware that there's not going to be anybody in that property.
Right.
And a majority of insurers will at that point then ask you to do certain things to the property to secure it. So they may well ask you to make sure that the water's being turned off and the electricity is being turned off. They may ask you to sometimes block the letterboxes to stop people putting lots of things through and then potentially someone coming along and putting a match through and causing a fire. So it's vitally important you let the insurer know. Normally they will give you, say, maybe 30 or 60 days where the covers that you've got on the property will remain the same. But after that period, if it still remains unoccupied, then at that point they may then restrict your covers. So that you may lose, they may restrict them just to fire, lightning, earthquake and explosion. That is where they will leave it. So you will have no sort of wet peril, so water damage won't be there. You might not have any malicious damage covers if somebody breaks into the unoccupied property and breaks down walls or sprays paint everywhere or something along those lines. Those things won't be covered. So you need to be aware of that as a landlord, so you make sure that you secure your property the best that you can, because unfortunately in those circumstances the insurer may not cover all the risks that you originally were covered for when it had somebody in.
Now finally, number 6 in our sort of hit list of the things that stop claims is illegal use of property. Now that seems to be something which is growing. I know in our own town, Milton Keynes, lots of reports of people having cannabis farms suddenly springing up, and even people doing Airbnb, people running gambling dens whilst they hire the place for 2 weeks.
Correct. Now this opens up a whole can of worms in the sense that illegal activities often within a policy will not be covered.
Wow.
So if you haven't done the correct checks on your tenants, and then you've not got yourself or your managing agent then to go on and do a quarterly check and just have a walk around the property to make sure everything is okay, if there is an illegal activity happening within that property, a lot of insurers, not all, would not cover the damage caused by a cannabis farm, for instance. I personally have seen them before, and they involve things like ceilings being taken down, they involve tiles being lifted, ducting and all sorts of things, and significant amount of damage being done to the property itself.
Yeah.
Airbnb is an interesting one, because if you're a landlord and you change from renting your property on a 6 monthly rent or a long-term rent to Airbnb, again you need to tell your insurer. A lot of insurers will not cover Airbnb. So if you're renting your property out on an Airbnb basis, then potentially your covers are completely compromised if you haven't told your insurer and they've accepted it. So it's very, very important that you cover that. But coming back to the illegal activity side of things, yes, it's really again down to the landlord to do those due diligence tests and checks to ensure that these things don't happen. And also talk to a broker, because again, we may be able to find a policy that would cover those in the event that they unfortunately happen, even when you have done your due diligence and you are doing your checks.
So Simon, that's excellent advice to help people stay on the right side of claims, and pertinent, I think, for whether you're a landlord or in fact any type of business. If you've found that useful, make sure you're subscribed wherever you're watching this, and join the mailing list on Holsdale Insurance's website. That's all for myself and Simon. Bye for now.